All right, this is Roger Roots. I'm just trying to alert people to some fairly startling things that have arisen in these cases involving the shooting of Lavoy Finicum on January 26, 2016. Most of you are aware of the story. A group of people, including Lavoy Finicum, Ryan Bundy, Shawna Cox, Ryan Payne, Victoria Sharp, were all in a vehicle. This was during the time of that Malheur wildlife occupation protest in Oregon, and they were going to meet with the sheriff in Grant County, Oregon. They were ambushed by a large combination of Oregon State Police and F.B.I. Roadside ambush in the snowbank. Shots were open fire. They shot the vehicle, then they shot Lavoy Finicum 3 times in the back. They also shot Ryan Bundy in the shoulder, shot into the vehicle. What's arising right now is that it appears that the government is moving toward a position where they are not going to reveal the names of any of the shooters. And I'm in a court case right now. I'm representing Ryan Payne and Victoria Sharp in a lawsuit that was filed originally by Shawna Cox pro se at the deadline, the 2-year statute of limitations. Shawna Cox filed on January 26, 2018, earlier this year, at the deadline, the 2-year statute of limitations. She filed the lawsuit pro se on behalf of herself, Ryan Bundy, Ryan Payne, and Victoria Sharp. Again, Shawna paid the $350 filing fee and filed it pro se. I came into the case a little bit later, a couple weeks later, but by then, unfortunately, Shawna Cox and Ryan Bundy had decided to just dismiss the case. And they told me later it's because they don't have any trust in the federal courts, which of course, how many of us do have much trust in the federal courts? I will say this though, the federal courts, as bad as they are, have to occasionally rule against the government. They can't rule for the government every single case, every single time. If they did so, they would lose all legitimacy, all perceptions of legitimacy, and the American people would lose complete trust in the federal courts, and they would ultimately lose power. So it is in the self-interest of the judges to at least occasionally rule against the government. And I just want to throw that out. You know, I am an attorney, and I got into the case a little bit late. The original complaint that was filed had some flaws in it. We amended the complaint, filed a better version. At that point, Ryan Bundy and Shawna Cox had basically dismissed themselves from it, but Victoria Sharp and Ryan Payne indicated to me that they wanted to go forward with a lawsuit. I stepped in along with a local attorney in Portland, Oregon named Jim Buechel, and we were proceeding on the case. However, there was just a court hearing yesterday, a status hearing in Pendleton, Oregon, a very small little federal courthouse. Actually, it's upstairs from the post office in Pendleton, very small little courthouse. I was told by the clerk that it only is open once every 2 months, if you can imagine that. A federal courthouse open 1 day every 2 months. And it's only open for us because we demanded, all the plaintiffs, by the way, demanded that the court proceedings take place in Pendleton, which can ultimately draw a jury pool from the rural areas around Eastern Oregon as opposed to the metropolitan, more urban potential jury pool from the Portland area, for example. Anyway, it probably would benefit our case. You know, that's arguable. Anyway, the real thing to take away from this, it has arisen in these court proceedings that the government intends to conceal the names of all the shooters, the Oregon State Police and or F.B.I., other than the name of Joseph Astarita, A-S-T, Astarita. Other than his name, the government wants to conceal all the identities of all the shooters who opened fire on that vehicle that day and ambushed the vehicle and shot Lavoy Finicum in the back. I pointed out to the judge that the lawsuit was filed with all these John Doe. It's worded, you know, Ryan Payne, etc., versus John Doe 1, John Doe 2, John Doe 3, John Doe 4, etc., and Joseph Astarita. By the way, the only reason we know Astarita's name is because of a fluke, because he's being prosecuted by his own former employer, the United States government. He's being prosecuted for lying in the investigation. Essentially, they're alleging that Astarita fired some .308 rounds from his rifle during the episode and then lied and covered it up. So he's being criminally prosecuted, and he himself is an FBI agent, but he's on trial starting next week in Portland, federal court case. And we were hoping, all of us have been hoping, that we'll reveal those John Doe 1, John Doe 2, we'll get their names. Remember, you can't sue anyone unless you know their names. You're never going to collect any money from them unless you know their names. And so it's quite common in police brutality and police violence cases for people to file a lawsuit without knowing the names of the officer defendants, and they'll use John Doe 1, John Doe 2. Ultimately, throughout the discovery and throughout the litigation, they learn the identities, and then they're able to go forward with the case. This is standard practice in federal and state court. In this case, however, the government is moving toward a position to try to conceal the names all through all these parallel litigations. I stood up yesterday in court and I said, hopefully next week during the Astarita criminal trial, we will be able to determine the names of some of these other government defendants who committed acts of violence and assaulted my clients and Lavoy Finicum and others. The attorney for the state of Oregon then stands up and says, no, actually they have a deal and an order, a court order, that in the trial next week they're going to conceal the names. The names won't even be revealed. They will be going to the jury. The jury will hear them as Trooper 1, Trooper 2, Trooper 3, and the audience sitting there, and I will be in the audience taking notes myself, will only know them as Trooper 1, Trooper 2, Trooper 3. Think of how preposterous this is. Number one, it creates a false impression on the jurors' minds that these guys there's such security issues involving this, that the government is so afraid of the atmosphere of the American people, the so-called, the Bundy supporters or whatever. It creates this false illusion. And anyway, to make a long story short, after the court proceeding in Pendleton yesterday, I was in a conversation in the hallway with the attorney for the state of Oregon. He said that in order to serve, in a lawsuit you have to serve the lawsuit on the other side. In order to serve them, that he would facilitate me serving the other side, but not knowing who they are. In other words, I can serve them with the lawsuit without knowing who they are, and he'll just facilitate that somehow. I think they were moving toward an argument where they're trying to make it so these guys' names will never be known. Never known to the public. So they're trying to create a precedent where the government can essentially ambush, waylay, and assault the American people, open fire on the American people, shooting them in the back and killing them, and then remain anonymous. How could you win a lawsuit? How could you collect any money from these defendants if you're ever successful? Anyway, I will say that the lawsuit has some problems. It hangs by a thread. Ours does. There's a rival lawsuit filed by Jeanette Finicum, a wrongful death lawsuit, which is a different case number. The attorney for Jeanette Finicum was with me there in the hearing yesterday, and we argued both cases simultaneously. I will say the judge gave me 30 days to brief about some of the problems in the original complaint. It lacks a signature or two. The judge also said that the other signature was improper. Anyway, the judge is telegraphing that she thinks the case is going to be dismissed unless I prove to her that it shouldn't be dismissed and that it can proceed with the signatures that were on the lawsuit originally. The real problem is the statute of limitations was that day. It was filed at the deadline. And so Shawna Cox filed it, and that was no doubt legitimate, but the judge is saying that the other signatures weren't legitimate, and Victoria Sharp's signature was missing from that original complaint. Later on, I entered the case and signed the amended complaint, but the amended complaint has not yet been granted yet. So the case hangs by a thread. Now, Philpot's case, which is Jeanette Finicum's larger case, the wrongful death lawsuit, appears to be going well. Yesterday, there was discussion about whether or not his team had properly served the lawsuit on the defendants. Anyway, I'll let them discuss that. In the courtroom that day was there were 4 lawyers for the other side. There was a lawyer for the United States, a lawyer for Harney County, Oregon, and a lawyer for the state of Oregon. There was also a lawyer for the Center for Biological Diversity, who is a defendant in that other lawsuit, not the lawsuit I'm involved in. Anyway, like I said, the most startling thing that I take away is this movement toward secret named government, where government is able to essentially act against us violently, and they're moving toward a position where we'll never be able to identify them. I had an argument with the lawyer in the hallway, and I said, my client gets death threats all the time. Ryan Payne gets death threats all the time, and yet he doesn't go around trying to impose a rule on the world that they can't reveal his name to the world. This is a startling precedent. It's very scary, and it's very dangerous.